Hello and welcome to Woodfired Weekly at Manna from Devon Cooking School. This week we are going to be cooking focaccia bread. This is one of our absolute favourites to bake in the wood-fired oven. We're going to start off by making a biga, and a biga is just a sort of overnight ferment which allows the dough to mature nicely and adds flavour and texture. We're going to take flour, in this case Durham wheat 00 flour, so that and a little bit of yeast, sort of 0.5% of the weight of flour, water, 100% hydrated, so in this case I've got 250 of water, 250 of flour. Mix that up. So I'm going to cover that, and I would then leave it overnight in a cool place and just allow that to mature. Simple as that. When you come back to that the next morning, you'll have something looking like this and smelling sweet and aromatic, because it's been developing that flavour overnight. So this biga, this pre-ferment, is now going to go into our fresh dough and to add flavour. So in here I've got more 00 flour, now salt, yeast. I'm also going to add some oil at this stage, just a kind of a tablespoon or so of oil. Mix that in, add all of the biga, and water, cool water again. I want this dough to ferment and develop at a nice slow rate. Mix it all up, and we'd expect to get a soft, sticky dough. Slightly daunting, so really good that you're watching this video, because you'll see how to develop this dough even though it's a very sticky little number. I'm quickly bringing this together. No finesse required here, just bash it up and plop it out onto the table. Now if we have a look at this, at the moment no protein development, there's no gluten in there, we haven't started to develop that. So I'm just going to use my fingertips to lift this dough, touch it down on the table, give it a little stretch, fold it over on itself, and I only end up with dough on my fingertips, not all over my hands, so I hit the same spot every time, nice and rhythmic. So I've just given that a couple of minutes work, and if we have a close look at this now, it's sort of nicely mixed up. I can't see any big lumps or bumps in it, so I've broken up all the flour and mixed it in. If I do that little pull test, it's got lots of strength now because we've developed plenty of protein. Once we're happy that we've got sufficient mixing done, pop that into a bowl and put that out of the way. It doesn't need to be anywhere particularly warm. Leave that for an hour. The focaccia dough's had an hour and a half or so of rising. You can see it's nicely risen there. Into the pan with some olive oil, and then I'm going to carefully ease the dough out of this bowl into the tray. I just stretch and fold, stretch and fold. So a nice soft dough, and this stretching and folding technique. So we're going to give this now a good couple of hours of stretching and folding, and every 30 minutes or so we'll just come and do another stretch and fold. Our dough has had a little bit over 30 minutes and it's nice and relaxed. It's starting to rise, and it's going to be easy to stretch and fold. Adding a little bit of olive oil each time I shape this, stretching it, folding it over on itself, stretching it, folding over on itself. And with this I have to be a little bit assertive with the dough, but also, and really importantly, I don't want to be heavy-handed, because I don't want to flatten the dough and knock the gas out of it. So we'll leave that, put that aside, and leave it for another 30 minutes. So when we look at this dough now, you can really see that it's nicely risen. So another stretch and fold, exactly the same technique, just loosen it all up and elongate those bubbles. So under here now things are really starting to move. I'm going to give one last stretch and fold and begin the sort of final shaping process. I then let it rest just 10 minutes or so, give it another dibble, and then start to put my toppings on. And I've got a little collection here of some cherry tomatoes, some onions which I've coated in oil, and a little bit of thyme. Our dough has had 10 minutes to relax, and you can see it's puffing up again beautifully, spreading out a little bit more. And now all I'm going to do is gently dibble the dough, and it kind of starts to spread out towards the edges of the tin. So I've got some cherry tomatoes here, halved, and we want these kind of tucked down into the dough, so that when the dough rises, they kind of rise around the tomatoes and hold on to them. In the meantime, a little bit of thyme or marjoram or rosemary or whatever you fancy over there, and of course a bit of sea salt, a little bit of red onion we're going to have today over here as well, and we're going to let that rest again. The final stage of our focaccia. Now that when I give these tomatoes a little push, they immediately cut through the surface of the dough and sink in. Now this bread cooks perfectly in this oven if I fully heated it and then taken the embers out and let it rest for about 15 minutes. And then it's sitting at around about 265 degrees, the perfect temperature to cook this bread with a nice hot floor which is going to bake it. But we don't always have the luxury of cooking it like that. Maybe I don't want the oven that hot for what I'm going to cook next. Maybe I've already been doing something which has taken heat out and I don't want to reheat, or maybe I'm using a different sort of oven which doesn't have as much refractory, which doesn't retain the heat so well, and in that case I'm going to need to keep a fire burning in the oven. Now if I've got a fire burning in the oven, that means I've probably got a hot side and a cold side, and the temperature is a little bit unstable. So I have to be careful to keep it kind of tickling over at a nice rate to maintain a steady temperature. And so that I don't scorch one side of the bread, I'm going to use this little guy, and this is just a metal heat diffuser. And then I'm going to slide this in, not too close to the deflector, and I don't want too much flame going over the top. If I've got too much flame, I'll grill the top of the bread and then I'll burn it. So just a small flame to keep the temperature up where I need it. I'm not going to put the door on tight because then my fire would go out. So I'm just going to put it on sort of fairly loosely. We've had 7 or 8 minutes of cooking time. You can see that the fire is still burning away. Our bread is browning, a little bit more on this side than on this side, so I'm going to turn it round for even cooking. Pop that back in, another 7 or 8 minutes. Our focaccia's had just over 15 minutes, so now is the moment of truth to see if we got the oven temperature just right. And that looks pretty good to me. So we've got a lovely colour on the top. It's got some lovely toasty colour on it. Very nice. We'll just let that cool down a bit and it's ready to cut. So that's our wood-fired focaccia, the perfect centerpiece for any table. Thank you for joining us on Woodfired Weekly. We'll put the recipe on our blog, link below will take you directly there. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe to our channel and we'll see you next time.